All right, so chapter 2, verses 1 through 5. It says, "My son, if you accept my words and store up my commands within you, turning your ear to wisdom and applying your heart to understanding, and if you call out for insight and cry aloud for understanding, and if you look for it as for silver and search for it as for hidden treasure, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God." So we're going to start here by looking at verse 5. Verse 5 is the promise or the payoff, okay? Because it says, "Then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God." Remember, last week we said that Hebrew poetry is all about different kinds of parallelism. So what kind of parallelism do you think describes verse 5? So it could be that Solomon is considering the fear of the Lord and the knowledge of God as being the same thing. After all, to know God is to worship him in awesome reverence. Or it could be Solomon sees these as two different things. The fear of the Lord being worshiping him in awesome reverence, and the knowledge of God is having intimate knowledge of God, a word that speaks of a deep, loving relationship. But either way, the fear of the Lord necessitates the knowledge of God. Until you know him, you won't fear him. And the more you know him, the more you fear him. So the promise or payoff is a growing relationship with God. A relationship with God that is going deeper and deeper, which leads to worship and awe and reverence, which leads to wisdom, which leads to the practical living of a godly life. But the payoff, or the promise, is conditional. It's conditional. Now, I have not gone through the Bible to look at each and every one of God's promises, so I can't say all of God's promises are conditional, but I know that many are. Many are. Some say that all of God's promises are conditional, but clearly Proverbs 2 says that understanding the fear of the Lord and finding the knowledge of God is conditional. And there are 3 ifs in verses 1 through 5. So it says, if, then. So let's look at these conditions or these ifs. Okay? The first one, it says, "If you accept my words and store up my commands within you, turning your ear to wisdom and applying your heart to understanding." Verses 1 and 2, maybe you'll remember this term from last week, verses 1 and 2 are synthetic parallelism, meaning the second part builds on the first part. Okay, it just takes it farther. Kind of what Dan was talking about in verse 5. It just builds on it. The first part of verse 1 says that if we will take hold of or accept the words and wisdom of Solomon. But the second part of verse 1 says we must do more than just accept it. It says we must store it up, which means to hide it. The word literally means to hoard something. When you think of hoarding, what do you think of? A mess, okay? All right. How many of you ever saw or came across that TV show, Hoarders? Yeah? Okay. So maybe, any of you ever, well, let's go back and ask this. Are any of you hoarders? Okay. Yes. Yes. An organized hoarder? Okay. Do any of you know a hoarder? Yes. Okay. So one of my wife's best friends when we lived in another state was a hoarder. And when I was a police chaplain, there were times when I had to go in homes of hoarders. And I can remember there was a home where we had to wade through garbage and junk and fast food bags that were up over our knees going through the living room. And they just wouldn't throw anything away. Because who knows? You might need a Burger King bag sometime. So, that's their mentality. So he says here, this idea of storing up my commands within you means to hoard them. So how does hoarding the words and wisdom of Solomon mean something more than accepting the words and wisdom of Solomon? Accepting the words means I take them in. Hoarding the words or treasuring the words means I hold them close. I see value in them. That's the whole problem with hoarders, right? Like I said, there's value in that Burger King bag because someday I might need it. And if I throw it away, then I won't have it. So they see value in all this stuff. So, and it says here that we are to take the words and wisdom of Solomon and we are to turn our ears to it, which means that we listen carefully to them. But then even beyond that, we are to apply our hearts to his words and wisdom, meaning that we shape our heart to what Solomon teaches. That's the idea there. It's almost, you can kind of think of it as a sculptor, okay? Somebody who works with clay and they shape that clay. And when we take in God's word and when we value God's word, we need to sculpt our heart, shape our heart according to that word. Okay? A lot of people do just the opposite, don't they? This is how I feel about it, so this is how I'm going to interpret God's word. This is how I feel about it, so in this case, I'm going to ignore God's word. Okay? But what this is saying is God's word takes precedence. We accept it, we value it, we treasure it, and so our heart, and what does the heart refer to? Okay, thinking, passions, love, what we desire, okay? All of that is shaped according to God's word that we've accepted and we are treasuring. So then it says, so that's the first condition. If you accept my words and store up my commands within you, turning your ear to wisdom and applying your heart to understanding. That's the first condition. The second condition, it says, if you call out for insight and cry aloud for understanding. Now this is synonymous parallelism, meaning that the two parts are saying the same thing, just using different words. Okay? And the idea here is calling out after somebody. Hey, Joe, come here. Okay? And that's how we are to be with God's word and God's wisdom and God's instruction. I want you, come here. Okay? So we have to have that. Call out for insight, cry aloud for understanding. And then it says, if you look for it as for silver and search for it as for hidden treasure. Again, this is just saying the same thing in different words. Strong's Concordance says that this idea of looking for means to search out specifically in worship and in prayer. It means more than just searching out. It means specifically to search out in worship and in prayer. So if we look for God's word, if we look for God's wisdom, if we look for God's instruction, one of the clear ways we find that, we hear that, is in worship and in prayer. And why do you think Solomon says that we should look for it as for silver? It's valuable. Yeah, what was that? We should value it. Yes. Yeah. This isn't sand. It's not dirt. This is God's word. It's precious. It's valuable. And he says that we are to search for it as if it was a hidden treasure. Now, what is that word search? What does that indicate to you, the word search? What was that? Okay, seeking understanding. What? To make an effort. Yes. If you search, have you seen some of these shows where they search for hidden treasure? Okay, what are they willing to do to find that hidden treasure? About anything you need to. That's right. And that's how we should be when it comes to discovering and learning and treasuring God's word, God's truth, God's wisdom. And then, verse 5, the payoff, the promise, then, if, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God.